So let's make a super cool ice text using the Cycles render engine. So let's start our cool ice text project using Cycles. We start as always putting in a fresh default screen. So go File, New, Reload Startup File, and there's our default screen. But before I go on, I want you to be able to see all the mouse input that I give. So I hit my properties panel on N, scroll down to start display. I'll pull it down, and this is where I set my the size of my mouse. I want a fairly large mouse to appear in the corner here. I want the color of the mouse to be a sort of a bluish green, as you can see there. And the fade out time, in other words, the time for each instruction to appear, no longer than 2 seconds. That should be fine. I want to get rid of that, so I hit N again, and the panel is gone. I might as well get rid of this panel here, which is the toolbox panel, and I hit the T, and that's out of the picture. Now, my cube is already selected, but I also want to delete the light, so I go Shift right click and then delete, and those two are out the picture. Now I want to see the view through my camera, so I hit numpad 0. I now want to add my text, so I go Add Text, and there's the text. I want the text not to lie down but to stand up, so I need to rotate it on the red line, the x-axis, which then is R, x-axis, and 90 degrees, and there she is. Now I want to modify the text somewhat. First of all, I wanted to read something different, so I hit Tab to go into edit mode, as you can see down here, and I scroll backwards and I type, I've got my caps on, have I? Yes. C space O space O space L. Cool. I hit Tab again and then use one of these handles, and I pull my text across to the center of the screen. Now let's scroll a little bit closer so I get a better view. Now I want to add some thickness to the text and also want to do some beveling. Now the moment you have activated text, an extra rollout appears here on the properties menu. This is the F. If you click on that, you've got this rollout, and you've got choices here under the geometry. I want to change the extrusion to 0.1. It's about 10%. And there you are. It's thicker. Now I also want to add some bevel, and very little bevel. Call it a 0.05. That's my bevel. Now I want to soften that all, so I change my resolution to, let's give it a fairly strong number, 7, and you can see the cool is looking pretty cool. So let me just get my view back here. That actually looks pretty neat. Now the next step is to put the cool text on a table, on a plane. So the first thing I need to ensure is that my 3D pointer is at the center, and I go Shift S, and cursor to center. Cursor moves to the center. I can also move this to the center, and by hitting period. Now I add a plane. Add mesh plane. Here's the plane. I need it somewhat larger, so I can scale it up so it's S, 5 times the size, and 5, and bam, there it is. Now let me change my view so that I have a front view. I can see what this looks like a lot better. So I hit 1, and that gives me a front perspective view. That's not what I'm looking for. I want an orthographic view, so I hit 5, and I want to pull the plane just a little bit underneath the text. Actually, let me select the text and pull the text a little bit up above the plane. I just want a little gap between the two. It'll become clear why a little bit later. Now, for the cool text to be made to appear like ice, we actually need to turn it into a fluid. And the moment you deal with a fluid, for example, we make the text a fluid, we need to put it in a container to contain the text. So to create the container, we use a cube and we shape it to cover the text. So we go add a mesh and we ask for a cube. The cube now is obscuring the text. We can't really see the text. So what we do is we go wireframe and we can see through it. Now let's just position the cube so that it is a little bit underneath the plane, so that when we actually run the simulation, the cool text will sort of run down and almost appear as if it's melting. It'll become clear in just a little while. So let's scale this on the X scale on the X axis. So it's S, X, and get around. So let's take a top view to make sure that the text is fully covered. Yes, that's good. So let's go back to a frontal view, and there we are. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to have a light emitter. So to do that, we're going to create a plane and use the plane as a light emitter. So we're going to position that light emitter just directly above the container. So let's position our 3D cursor there, and we go add mesh plane. There's the plane. Let's scale it up a little. So you hit S, scale it up so it's just a little bit smaller than the cube. Now let's get a top view, and we need to scale it in so that it fits inside the domain or the cube. So we scale it on a y-axis. Let me pull it up and scale it on a y-axis. And let me pull it up. And I need it just a little bit better fit, so scale it on the scale it on the x-axis. And we can move the text just a little bit so that it's neatly in the center. So let's go back to a front view. We select our plane, our emitter, and then from there we go to the material panel. Left click on material, and before we select new, let us now first select cycles render. This is important because only now will you get a new set of choices here. So you then open new and you get this new set of choices which are related to creating the ice type text. Here you have a choice here under surface. You click on that and you have a variety of selections, and you choose emission. Now that means that you're using this plane as a light emitter. Now here you can set this, you can set the color of the light. You can change that with a color wheel, but we're going to keep it white for this time. And then the strength of the light. So we want to really up that up quite a bit. So we change from 1 to 20. Next, I want to allocate a material to the plane that our text will eventually be resting on. And in this instance, all we're doing is we're selecting the default setting. So that will be grayish in color, and we'll just leave it at that. Now we select the text itself, and we now want to convert this text so that it behaves like a fluid. But it is not yet mesh. It is still the original curves, and I need to change this text to a mesh. And the way to do that is Alt-C, Alt C, and you get this convert mesh to from curve, and it now changes into a mesh. So now that I have my text changed to a mesh, I now go over to the properties panel and select the very last one here, which is the physics rollout. And I wish to turn this text into a fluid for a fluid simulation. And here is a selection of type. So I choose there fluid as well. Now I need to convert this container to a fluid container. So I right click to select the container. I choose fluid, and also under type I say, well, what I want this time, I want it to be a domain. In other words, to contain the fluid. So I left click on that, and my simulation has begun to run. Now I need to make some settings. First of all, I want my resolution. I ramp that up to 100, and I want to run the simulation in a very, very short time. So I have a start frame, a start time, and an end time. I'm just going to make it 0.1. So it's very, very short. And then I need to set my timeline here. We only need very few frames, so I'm going to set that at 20. Make my selection. My start frame is 1, my end frame 20, and I can roll that out so it's more visible. So I'll grab that handle and then that handle, middle mouse click, pull it to the center, and just roll it on my scroll wheel. So the simulation will run from frame 1 to frame 20. So now I need to run my simulation. So I go bake. I will click on bake, and that, by the way, there tells me how much memory is going to be utilized to run this simulation. So I left click to select it, and the simulation runs, as you can see at the top there with the progress bar, and the simulation is over. Now you can see that the text is actually separated, so the simulated text as well as the old text. Now I want to get the old text out of the way, and I don't want to inadvertently select it. So I right click to select the old text that is before the simulation, and to ensure that I don't inadvertently select it, I scroll down here to the outliner, and I left click on the camera so that it will not render the old text, and neither will I be able to see it, so it's out of the picture. So now if I select the text with a right click, I only have my simulation. Now during the simulation has actually sort of fallen down slowly down to the level of the plane, and this creates an ideal opportunity to make it look like the text is melted, the ice is melted. So the way to see a suitable frame, you scroll the line on, you can see the text dropping, and decide which frame is most suitable so that your text is still intact enough, but the shape of the text is still sufficient to show or enable you to read it. So if I take it all the way through, it's maybe not too bad. There you are. There's the cool text. In fact, I think I'm going to use frame number 20. Now next up, I want to convert this text into a glass-like surface, so that it looks like ice. So I'll go to the properties panel, click on material, new, and here under surface I click there and I choose glass. Now basically it will convert my text to appear as if it is glass. There's a little bit else to do. I need to get the background sorted out, so I go to the world panel, and over here at my color wheel I pull the slider up to about halfway through and select myself a nice kind of wintry blue. And if I now move my camera to a suitable point, I would need to do the rest. So next I want to move my camera to a suitable point, so let me just hit the camera view. It's not the view that I want, so if I right click to select the camera and I go Alt G, let me get a better view here, and to take that centers the camera, and then to take the rotation out, Alt R, and then we get a side view. You can see where the camera is, and there's the text. That's not what we want, but now I need to turn the camera up 90 degrees on the x-axis, so I rotate it x 90 degrees. Oops, it's gone because my cursor was in the wrong position. So let me just undo that, move my cursor to the center, Shift S, cursor to center, and now it'll pivot on that point. So I hit rotate X 90 degrees. That's much better. Now I take the slider and I pull it across. To help me see the view a lot better, if I go to a quad view by going Control Alt Q, I have a much better view while I'm moving the camera around. So you can see here's the camera view, and in this panel here I can move it to where I think would be suitable. So I think that should be a pretty good view. So let me go out of quad mode, so it's Alt Control Q, and let me hit 0 for my camera view, and that's it there. So let's hit F12 for render. Now it's only got very few samples. That's why it's still so grainy, but you get an idea of what it looks like. So the idea here is to be able to render it fairly quickly with low samples, just to make sure that things are right, and then later on add additional samples. Now before we do that, you'll see that these straight lines, etc., perhaps you don't like that and you want this to be smoothed out. A way we could do that is if you hit T for the toolbox, you have a choice here. If you've got your text selected, you have a choice here of flat or smooth. Now currently it's on flat, that's why you have those flat panels, but if you smooth that and re-rendered, it gets rid of those straight lines. So there you have it. That's now what the text looks like with the smoothed effect. I prefer the straight lines. It's sort of more authentic for me, so I'm going to go back to that. So I go Escape and I change it to flat, and I would then hit re-render. But I want to now do the final render with the more samples. So I go to the little camera over there, scroll down to sampling, and you'll see that currently the render samples are just 10, which is useful if you want to have a quick look at what your material looks like. I now want to ramp it up to improve the sampling by 500, and I hit F12 to re-render. Now this is going to take a little while, so I'll get back to you in a little while after it's rendered. So I think that looks pretty cool. Obviously this render took a very long time because with the 500 samples, etc. Now that we have our image, we want to save that. So the image is taken, but now we need to make sure that it is saved. To do that, you need to go F3, and this gives you your directory. Let's say I want mine under My Documents Blender. This is my directory, and then it's a PNG file. You can choose to change that. I'll show you how in a moment. But let's say I want to call it cool.png, and then I will save as an an image. If I wanted to change it from PNG to something else, if I go here under the render selection, I have a choice here of PNG, and if I open that up, a whole variety of other file formats that I can save it in. And the same applies, of course, if it's a movie file. In this instance, it's just an image, so it's I chose just to have a PNG, but it could be BMP or anything else for that matter. Also, a good idea is to save your work. You need to go out and save this as a blend file. So you go File, Save As, and there you've got your directory, and all blend files are saved as .blend. So let's call that cool.blend, and that is then saved under blend files. So with your blend files saved as well, you can go ahead and experiment with this yourself.